As a new dentist, you're coming in, you're going to open up a business. You've probably consulted an attorney, you've probably gotten an accountant, probably talked to some of your mentors. Office managers, please take that call from the insurance agent when they call you. They are more than likely not trying to sell you something, but trying to protect the relationship from gaps within the insurance portfolio.
I always put the calls through because we realized that if they were calling, it was because there was a new threat that we had to know about.
And 75% of the commercial properties are underinsured by 40%. That is a problem that's industry-wide.
I think we need to protect ourselves out there.
The cyberspace is moving so quickly.
What should a manager or new dentist owner be looking at? What kind of policies?
You don't need to buy all of it at one time. Get the plan, make sure you understand the gaps, look at your budget, and work with your agent over time to make sure you cover the gaps. That's the most important.
And we are back with another edition of Nobody Told Me That. And for my insurance nerds, I have a little twist on the insurance nerdiness for you today. I have from TDIC and TDIC Insurance Solutions, I have Jack Mckinney. He is I have to look at this big title, VP of Sales and Service. He's here to talk to us about the other insurance that we typically don't really think about until we need it. So Jack, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Teresa. Nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
This will be fun. When you're an office manager, I started as an office manager. Well, I started as other things, but office manager. The business insurance, the part that we're going to talk about today, was sort of a mystery, and I just always knew the doctor had to have it. I really wasn't involved with purchasing it because it was already in place. And I really wasn't involved with updating it. Now that I think back, I don't think we updated it all that often, which is something I want to talk to you about. So we have a lot of young dentists listening, and we have a lot of managers who now are doing more heavy lifting in the office. When I strip out dental insurance, which is my world, and I bring in business insurance, what does that mean? And what should a manager or new dentist owner be looking at? What kind of policies?
I'll step away from the policies for a second and let's talk about the relationship with the insurance agent. The insurance agent needs to be as a new dentist, you're coming in, you're going to open up a business. You've probably consulted an attorney, you've probably gotten an accountant, probably talked to some of your mentors. And if you've got strong ties or a strong dental association in the state, maybe worked with their practice support. Please include that insurance agent in that relationship. Getting them involved early, letting them know what you do or plan on doing as a business owner, as a practice owner, is extremely important and will save you time and money and mistakes down the road. For that established dentist that has the office managers, please take that call from the insurance agent when they call you. They are more than likely not trying to sell you something, but trying to protect the relationship from gaps within the insurance portfolio. 2 big points there. Make that insurance agent a part of your team. Do some research. It's really good to have someone that's connected to the dental industry, and I could talk a little bit about that in a second. But yeah, it's an important relationship to establish up front.
I'm thinking about, you just mentioned something like when the insurance agent calls, whenever somebody called from the insurance company, and it wasn't, of course, the dental insurance company, I always put the calls through because we realized that if they were calling, it was because there was a new threat that we had to know about. And so I'll give an example to the listeners. When we started, we didn't have cyber insurance because there was no cyber, right? And that wasn't something that we thought to add on until we got a call. And they said, listen, we need to talk to your IT. And we had just heard it from our managed service person too. So it was kind of rattling around. And they made the case that, hey, there's stuff you need to consider. And that's a good example of a gap. Like if you're just plodding along in your office, you don't think about these things.
Correct. That's exactly more than likely what the agent is calling about. Your agent should be reviewing your portfolio at least, every other year, if not every year, and looking for those gaps and then addressing them with you. And I know everyone's busy. That's the hardest part for us as an agent is depending on what we call them the points of entry. So when the doctor has time to speak to us or the office manager, it can be 5 minutes, Sometimes if we're lucky, we get that full hour to spend doing a complete review. But
Mhm.
trying to make that time to give the agent the time to do the review. I liken it to if a patient walked into a dental office and said, "I only have 5 minutes, please extract this tooth," you wouldn't accept that patient, right? Well,
Yeah.
there's not
Yeah.
much of a difference. We need time to do our job and to make sure that the office is protected.
It's not really a one size fits all. I mean, it's not very dissimilar to how dental premiums are paid. And I'm trying to just draw the correlation here. When a claim is paid out, there's a lot of factors there. But for business insurance, it's not just I'm a dentist, I'm X years old, here's my premium. You were saying in the pregame conversation, there's things like location, there's things like type of practice and services added. So whenever you want to, because I know we have other policies to talk about, but what is it that is considered when pricing a policy that I think a lot of people don't realize is going into pricing?
Yeah. Each carrier has a different way of pricing.
Hmm.
Obviously, location, it could be zip code specific, it can be state specific. Anesthetic modalities, classifications can impact pricing.
Okay.
Some
That's
carriers proceed.
sedation and is that
cor-
sedation and all of that?
Correct. Yes. And
Okay.
some
Okay.
carriers rate by procedure. So when asked, well, what's the best option? It varies by dentist and by practice. But what I always say is broader is better. So if you can
Okay.
find a policy that is tied to the scope of dentistry that is approved by the state dental board, then as long as you're doing what your license allows you to do, that policy will cover everything. That's good. When you start looking at different procedures that may or may not be covered, that's okay. But that means you need to update as you grow, right?
Hmm.
More often. You need to have a closer relationship with that insurance agency so that there are no gaps in coverage. And we all get busy, right? Making sure you call every time you change a little bit in your practice can be difficult. I recommend it. But that's why starting broader, in my opinion, is a better approach.
I would think it's not very hard to just send you an email and say, "Hey, we're adding Botox. Is there anything we need to know?" I mean, it's not like I have to go fill out a ton of forms, right? Like you would call me and say, "Okay, we need to look at the policy." And you mentioned Botox specifically when we were talking earlier. And man, everybody's doing Botox. I mean, if your state is allowing it, I mean, one of my doctors I've known forever who really never considered it is like, "Oh, well, the state's allowing it. So let me go check it out." And it's like, wow. But I guarantee you, he hasn't thought to call his carrier now that I think about it.
W-
So, yeah.
And it can be tricky. Botox, in most cases, most carriers allowed for dental related treatment, the maxillofacial area. But when you start doing the eyes and forehead, then you're getting into a different discipline. Some carriers have
Yeah.
endorsements you can add to cover that. You may have to go out and get
Mhm.
separate insurance. But so every carrier is a little unique and it does not hurt to contact your insurance agent. But to your point, like it's a simple email. Believe it or not, I've had dental practices move and call us 5 years later and they've got a completely new building. They've been completely uninsured in this new building for 5 years. They just thought the policy moved with them. And, that's just a common misconception that some have.
Yeah. That is wild. Okay, so if I'm moving buildings, you've gotta take a look at the location, right? And you've gotta take a look at, like, your are you insuring the building too and the equipment and all of that? Do you
Yeah,
get into all of that too?
we
So,
do.
if they move buildings, they probably got bigger, so they have more chairs, more equipment. They probably need to raise the limit or whatever the insured amount is. And you got to help me on this because this is where I have reached my insurance limitations. Like if they're adding if a second sterilization area, that's a lot of expensive equipment. Am I going in the right direction?
You're right on track. You can join my team anytime.
Okay. Because now I'm getting scared. I'm getting scared
Yeah.
of a couple of my old clients, right? So
No,
interesting. Okay.
that's exactly right. And the risk changes, right? So it may be a different zip code, different fire protection classes. So the risk itself may change. More importantly, as you're getting to is you probably have increased your equipment and you need to make sure you get new equipment added, so forth. And that's where working with an agent or agency that understands your practice is very important. A couple things to be aware when it comes to property. If your agent asks you, well, how much do you want this insured for? The response is, well, I don't know. How about this amount? Okay, that sounds good. There really should be some thought into it. There's what they call replacement cost estimators to evaluate what the building would cost to rebuild or the interior, the tenants improvements and betterments that you might do. So there's software that can be used to help get that to a proper insurance to value. And then there's the equipment. Had I not worked for the dentist insurance company or being owned by the California Dental Association, and I was a normal independent agent, I wouldn't know what the equipment costs. We have equipment lists. We walk
Yeah.
through, we make sure everything is properly priced. And Teresa, today, well, in the last couple of years, I like to bring some stats to everything I do here, but 75% of the commercial properties are underinsured by 40%. That is a problem that's industry-wide.
And they're finding this out when they go to make a claim.
They're
Is
finding
that
this out when they go to make a claim. Correct.
wow? I'm guessing you all would see if a policy hasn't been touched in 2 or 3 years. I mean, there's outreach on your part, but you're finding that you're not getting the return calls or anything like that? Like, if they don't call you back or email, like, do you just go, "Eh"? I mean, what's the recourse there?
Well, probably like a dental office, right? Document on our part. Now I'm talking a little insurance
Yeah,
errors and omissions or malpractice, right? Documenting
yeah.
that we did reach out, we made the offer to do a review. That then puts a lot of that responsibility back on the dentist. We
Okay.
do spend a lot of time making sure we connect. And recently we had a project where we did the evaluations as an agency and we just went ahead and updated them for the client and they could
Okay.
request to opt out versus opting in just because so many were underinsured.
It just blows my mind, though. You spend so much money on equipment and don't up the policy. That's like a young couple buying an engagement ring or a wedding ring and not calling and saying, "Hey, can you insure my rings?" And I know that happens because I've just heard and had friends who were like, "Oh, wait, I'm supposed to call and insure." I'm like, "Girl, yes, go get your ring insured." you know? Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes equipment is purchased for those ancillary services. I think there's one out there, M-Face, it's a kind of can do facelift, but it can also be used to treat TMJ. So we'll
Mhm.
insure that if it's used for TMJ. We won't insure it if it's used for facelift. So making sure you
Oh,
call your insurance agent before you make the purchase or get into that business because you might find the insurance costs make it's prohibited. So
yeah. Yeah.
involving them in that decision early on is really a good idea.
Okay, so you've got a property equipment insurance, and a lot of them are encompassed in a general business policy, is that correct?
Correct.
You're not underwriting each.
Yeah, I was going to say some you can have your building and your space insured all in one. Some can keep it separate. Just depends on the insurance carrier. You had mentioned cyber. So
Mhm.
you can add cyber on as an endorsement. In some cases, you can add employer's professional liability on in some cases. Either way, whether it's a standalone policy or an endorsement to your business owner's policy, that is how you would make sure you have all the coverages that you need for the
Okay.
office.
Talk to me a little bit about when you said errors and omissions. From an entrepreneur standpoint, that's not clinical. For me, I mean, it's necessary when I was consulting, of course, like to protect myself because, advice I give is the best of my ability and, I should be doing good stuff with that, right? So errors and omission make sense to me for a non-clinical business. Help me understand what errors and omissions would be for a clinical business.
It would rarely be for clinical business. I was referring to
Okay.
the errors and omissions that as an insurance agency we carry.
Got it. Okay. No wonder I was confused. Okay, because I'm like, "Wait, how?" Okay.
Yeah. Now there are scenarios where we do have some dentists that teach and they
Okay.
teach at other
Okay.
locations and there might be a need for some or consulting. There might be some errors and omissions that is needed and we can help them with that as well. As just
Okay.
like any independent insurance agency that's out there, they will understand that risk. If you inform them, that's what you're doing, right? And that's where that relationship's very important.
Well, and I would hope that they would have a separate business entity for that and not have that tied to the dental practice, but, I mean, everybody's starting out and everybody's learning. I guess the equivalent of errors and omission would be malpractice.
Correct.
Um,
Correct.
for that. And I do wanna talk about disability, and I also don't let me forget, I wanna ask about key person insurance too. That's something that comes up every now and then, but talk to me about malpractice because I hear astronomical limits on some of these policies. What's the typical minimum? And I know it's hard to say this across the country, but what's a typical minimum and what factors into how high you can go with how much you pay for?
Yeah. So we see a million pretty much being standard in California.
Okay.
And your decision needs to be made individually by the state that you work in. Also by your circumstances. Are you in a specialty where there's higher risk? Your own personal tolerance. I know I'm overinsured, but I personally never want to experience that gap in insurance. So I am willing to
Right.
pay, being in the business, I'm willing to pay a little more for more insurance. But one of the considerations, and I'll use California because that's where the majority of our business is there's a MICRA, and I'm shamed I don't know what that stands for, but it limits, right, the lawsuits that can occur, the malpractice lawsuit limitation in the state. So you would want to take that into
Oh,
consideration as well, because if there's a limit
okay.
there, that might that's a form of protection as well. And you may not
Okay.
need the 3 million limit. So understanding what the state legal limits are, and your attorney could probably guide you
Mhm.
in that. I know our association is very well versed in the MICRA because they advocate for those things.
Yeah.
But there's resources out there that can help give you information to make a educated decision on the amount that you need. And your agent should be able to help you guide through that.
Are there mitigating circumstances where you could go above this micra? And one thing that comes to mind is, you always hear about these rogue dentists who are like just flat out not just malpractice, but intending. And then there's criminal charges. If there's criminal charges, does that mitigate any payout because it's not done in the, I guess, good faith of dentistry? I'm not sure if I'm using the right terms. Do you
No,
understand what I'm
I,
asking?
I understand. And claims is not my expertise, but there is coverage there regardless. I
Okay.
mean, if it's definitely criminal in nature, carriers could probably get off that, but I'd leave that up to our claims.
Why would you have to insure that?
Right,
Why
right.
would you insure that, right? Like, that's crazy. Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Then as far as the malpractice, and I've done some expert witness work for this, but it was years and years ago, and I just remember hearing, like, if there's a claim against you, it may or may not raise your rate. If there's 1 or 2, 3 claims, your rate's definitely going to go up and you may need to switch carriers, right? Is that still true in the industry?
That's still true. Some carriers, our primary carrier, the dentist insurance company, does not rate for claims. Some carriers do rate for claims. Some will just, depending on the amount of claims, cancel the policy. And then you have to go to what we call a high risk or ENS market, excess and
Okay.
surplus, which you're probably looking at 3 to 4 times the premium than your traditional policy. Yes. So,
Wow. Okay.
managing
Wow.
claims, we talked about documentation. It's very important. Practice management, having an expert, whether it's through an association or independent contractor, advising you on practice management procedures, best practices, very important. It can
Mhm.
protect you from claims. And most carriers have risk management departments that can also assist with that.
Yeah, I'm constantly saying in classes, when you're looking at your chart notes and templates, like, please contact your malpractice carrier. I have seen I mean, definitely TDIC, but I've seen amazing templates and forms in your portals. And if you're already paying for it through the premium, why would you not, take advantage of the resources there?
Yes,
So
exactly.
I tell the managers, like, if you could get your own login, get it. If not, just, utilize the doctors and log in and take a look because you probably have things there. And,
Yep.
my biggest issue is I got to convince the doctor to make these changes. And if it's coming from the malpractice carrier, it's a lot. That's a nice heavy stick I've got, to use. So hats off to you guys, though. You have a lot of resources in that department.
Absolutely. It's like a contract attorney, right? You want the attorney that writes the contract to defend it. And our risk management resources are legally approved, reviewed, updated. That's
Mhm.
the big thing is, there needs to be an update process. When those forms
Yeah.
are updated based on changes in the environment, definitely make sure you're getting those from your carrier.
Let me ask, do the policies cover when there's a fine from a state board investigation? Because even if it's a small infraction, sometimes there's a fine, and it doesn't mean that they're like guilty of malpractice, maybe just whatever. But is that also included, or should the doctor just pay that and not worry about it?
Unfortunately, I don't have the answer to that one.
Okay.
But
All right.
yes, I can. It's never come up. That's good. It sounds like we don't get a lot of fines.
No,
But
that's
yeah,
good. That's good if
I
it
can get
doesn't go
back
up,
to you on that
right?
one. Yes.
Yeah, because I read a lot of cases, as part of different projects that I do, and I'm always seeing, like, little fines of 5 or 10,000 or 2,000. I always think this is like getting your windshield broken with the car, like, do you wanna make a claim and then risk, whatever, or do you just pay for it on your own?
Right.
And I always wondered that, so sorry, Jack, I had you on the spot, and I figured
No,
I'd
that's
ask, so
okay. Well, as I
Okay,
mentioned earlier, I
so
got a team of
mhm,
55 that works for me. I'm sure half of them know the answer to that question. So,
yeah, probably don't even have to think about it. So
right.
it is wild to me how vast the world of insurance is. Just there's people who do the pricing, there's people who do the design of the plan, there's people who do all the, risk assessment, risk management, the sales side, and goodness, the claim side is a whole different thing. It really is I mean, insurance is a huge industry. And we always need to be covered as a business, because what I have seen is when you're not covered adequately, or maybe you let a policy lapse because you forgot to do something, that is when you're going to have something happen. Like it's like Murphy's law, right? Have you heard these horror stories through
Uh,
TDIC where like you miss one premium or you miss a year, you forgot? Like, I mean, what kind of a mess does that lead to? I just want to do cautionary tale here.
Sure. Well, I can give you a scenario as recent as yesterday.
Mm.
Failure to make a payment leads to cancellation, and it had been over, I think, 2 years. No claims, very good dentist, good reputation, but just failed to make that payment. Some of the guidelines that
Wow.
carriers use are filed with the state. And in this case, being uninsured would make that customer ineligible for the insurance. So now they have to go to the high risk
Mhm.
market. Now they're
Oh,
paying
wow.
3 or 4 times um, the cost. So staying on top of your bills, working with an agent that'll keep you informed. I mean, that's one of the things we do is
Mhm.
we're calling, making sure that, we inform people they haven't made their payment. But that gets back to my opening remarks. You got to take the call and read the email
Right.
so that we're not out there trying to sell, we're trying to help.
Oh,
But yeah,
yeah.
that's the
Yeah.
worst case scenario. Or worst case scenario is there's a claim and now you have no insurance, and who knows what that leads
Yeah.
to, right? It can be $1 million claim. It could be a $5,000 claim. So
In most states, is there a requirement that you have to have insurance to be a dentist, or I never thought about that.
I believe so, but I don't know if there's any monitoring of that,
Oh, okay. Yeah,
right? So
because
it's
I'm
not
thinking
like
if you I would wanna know that my doctor's insured, like,
eh,
I just assume now that I think about it, I don't think I've ever even thought about not doing that.
right. We check contractors, right, that come into your home. Are you insured, bonded? The state's checking to
Mhm.
make sure we have insurance when we go drive our car. I'm not sure in each state if anyone is monitoring that for a
I
dentist.
would imagine if you've got a note on the practice, a mortgage or something, they're gonna require it, and if you're contracted with carriers to be a PPO dentist, that's definitely required, but if you're not a PPO dentist and maybe you own your building outright, oh my gosh, y
Yes.
that's a very scary thing.
Yeah. You mentioned disability.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, the majority of the policies we sell for disability are related to some sort of loan requirement. And I always like to remind people you have to get the disability to insure the bank's interest, but what about your interest, right? Protecting the income for your family, protecting the income to keep the business going, business overhead expense, right? Because if
Mhm.
you're out maybe 6 months a year, keeping the practice up and running, making sure you're not losing patients can be very
Yeah.
important. So that's usually how we end up in the disability conversation, is because some banks requiring it. We always try to bring it up in a review as one of the major gaps among others, such as cyber, you mentioned, employment
Mhm.
practices, liability. Those are typically the gaps we see in coverage. But yeah,
So the disability does the bank require it and provide it, or they just require it? And do they require a certain dollar amount and you're seeing a gap in that? So are there 2 policies or a gap policy that should be in place? What does that look like? I'm just trying to make sure we kind of simplify that.
yes. So, yes, in many cases, the bank can provide the coverage, whether it's life or
Okay.
disability, because sometimes they require both. It's typically expensive and only
Okay.
covers the equipment. Whereas if you
Oh.
talk to your agent and you think a little more holistically about replacing income for your family or the business entity,
Mhm.
you can find that, for same amount or less, or maybe a little more, you've got much broader coverage. So that's usually where our individual disability sales come from, is that conversation that begins with the bank requirement. But that's why I always say
Uh,
be thinking about all of that when you enter your practice. A new dentist can get a disability, a life, a long-term care policy for that matter, probably for less than they spend at Starbucks a month. And it's some basic coverage, but it's good to have.
I am a huge advocate of disability insurance for the dentist. I've just seen too many. I've had friends that have this has happened. Long time in the industry, so a lot of friends. But I also work with a lot of dentists who are not clinical and they're in different positions. And I would say about half of them, maybe even more, it's because of a disability.
Yep.
That's a lot. And, I definitely, there's other alternatives to practicing, but when that's all you want to do, that's a huge hit. Is it replacing a year? So let's talk about death in a minute, but for disability, say it's something that they're able to come back from. So a short term disability, is it, 6 months, a year? Is it operating expenses? Is it just their income? What does that cover? I've never
It,
really looked into it.
it can be all of that. So if you
Okay.
stick to the business overhead expense, if you just want to look at keeping the business up and running, you could bifurcate those expenses and
Okay.
replace that. If you wanted personal, right, you want to include your family's expenses, things of that nature, you can do that as well. Typically, you have a 30, 60, 90-day, what we call elimination period, which means you're not going to get paid for 30 days or 60. It's your choice. Obviously, 90 days would be less expensive than 30. We do have some programs that supplement that can kick in at 14 days. It just depends on how much
Okay.
you want to pay and what you may have in reserves to cover that elimination period. The payments can range from 5, 10 to age 65, depending on what you're
Okay.
looking for. And again, all of that, the longer the payment is, the sooner it pays, the more expensive it can be. And then there's riders that you can add on to that as well. It's important that you ask the agent about some of the disabilities and how they are covered. Mental illness, right, can sometimes be excluded by specific classification because we do see a lot of
Oh,
that
well,
in our practice.
that would be burnout. Yeah, like burnout
Yes,
and
yes.
stuff. Interesting. Okay. All right. And what else?
Just make sure you compare the coverages. And most of your larger carriers are very similar. So Guardian,
Okay.
Emeritus, Massachusetts Mutual, MetLife, they're all very similar, but some have some unique differences. And you may just want to explore those with your agent so you make sure you get the coverage that you're looking for.
That's super important because on the dental insurance side, there's a lot of clauses that are what we call gotchas. And it's like, of course, it's the same over there. Like, I wouldn't have thought to see if there's a mental health carve out. That wouldn't have occurred to me. I would just assume that that's there. And the unfortunate side of this is there's the death. In that case, there's so much going on at that time, and usually it's an overwhelmed spouse, and I've been involved in this. The overwhelmed spouse that steps in has no idea about a lot of things. A succession plan was probably never discussed. So there's gotta be operating expense. There's just a lot there, and, the conventional wisdom from what I hear from CPAs is about 3 to 6 months operating expense in the bank just to keep it going and all of it, and we gotta bring in other dentists, and there's just a whole slew of stuff you need to do because the practice, of course, loses worth the
Sure.
longer it's inactive. What does a typical dentist passes away? We notify you. Is there more to it than that? What else happens in that conversation?
We'll need to cancel the policy. We'll need to make sure that the tail coverage, depending on the type of policy you have, if tail is required, is added to that. You'd mentioned buy sells, right? So we don't get involved in the legal aspect of buy sell, but typically the funding element for a buy sell is life insurance. So
Okay.
if we were used to purchase that life insurance, we would then execute that claim, make sure that the spouse gets the funds. Typically the attorney would be involved in helping keep that practice afloat till the sale could occur. Or if there was a succession plan, make sure that that transition happens seamlessly because as you said, it's a very difficult time. And as an agent, we have some responsibilities in that and we can help make that piece easier.
And you probably have resources too that could be brought to for them too. You just don't realize who you need to talk to until
Eh,
it's time. I remember working with one spouse and the business just hadn't been valuated in a long time. And same thing with the real estate and all of it. And so within a very small time period, we had to hustle for an independent valuation. I didn't. I had to make sure things were in place, but independent valuation and then of course keeping track of everything. That she did a lot of it, but she said it actually was helpful in a weird way because she didn't have time to grieve. And then when it was all over, then it really hit her. And, that was the unfortunate part. But She's like, "You cannot imagine being so busy because someone died that you can't even focus on the person." And it was wild to me that she went through that. Crazy.
Absolutely. And if you've got the funds there, right, that's one less stress that you won't have. Because
Yes.
just think about COVID. If that would
Oh my
occur during
gosh.
COVID, the sale, it may take a year. And having the
Yeah.
funds there to make sure everything can keep moving until you get the assessments, the appraisals, right, all of that, and find a buyer.
All right. So talk to me about this business interruption insurance because remember with COVID, everybody was like, oh, well, this counts under that. And some carriers were like, no, that doesn't count. And some were like, we have no idea. And I mean, I just was hearing all over the place, like everybody. And I know there were lawsuits and all of that. What on earth is going to happen? Should another, and God forbid, I hope not, another thing. What is the fine print with business interruption that we should know about?
Yeah. So with any claim, you need to look at what is a covered peril and
Apparel. Okay.
a
Peril.
peril.
Okay.
And the
Okay.
pandemic was not a covered peril. In any of
Okay.
the carriers we dealt with, any of the carriers I know, there probably have some carriers now that have popped up that said, we will insure that. Your
Mhm.
insurance agent can help you find that. It's probably going to be very expensive and it would be a separate add on, probably
Mhm.
through a non standard carrier or a non admitted carrier, maybe Lloyd's.
Okay.
I'm not familiar with
Oh
one
gosh.
that exists now, but no, it wasn't a covered peril, but a
Yeah.
fire,
Well,
that's a covered
okay.
peril.
Okay.
Um,
All right. And I'm laughing because Lloyd's of London, I mean, there's a lot of people that don't know it's big shishi insurance company in London. And
yeah.
like, I imagine, I think what was it? They insured someone's legs. Was it Tina Turner? I think
I
they
think there's been
insured.
several actresses over the years that have insured. Yes.
Yeah, they insure their body parts because that's
Yeah.
their moneymaker, and it's like, what is going on in the insurance world here? It's crazy. So anyway, so people are like, "What are you talking about?" But anyways, let's move on. So with the business interruption insurance, fire would be one. I mean, if you live in Tornado Alley, I'm sure that's in your policy,
Wind.
right? Flooding, all of that, like, that's I imagine, right? Or is that part of
Flooding.
property?
Yeah. Well, that would be part of the property insurance.
Okay,
So, or the business owner's property, what you'll hear referred to as a BOP. So flooding can be misunderstood. Pipe bursts. You're in a 4-story building. Pipe bursts, floods you. You're out of business for 3 months. That's a covered peril. A true
okay, okay,
flood is typically a separate policy. So you'll hear
okay.
flood insurance. That's where you would
Yeah,
need to make sure you have flood coverage. And again, working with an agent, they should be checking, are you in a flood zone? If you're not, then you're pretty safe. That's the one, like I said, I'm typically overinsured. That's the one. I'm not in a flood zone. I don't own a flood policy. I do own an
right, right.
earthquake policy though.
Of course you do. California, of course you do.
Probably only 10% of the homeowners own earthquake, believe it or not.
What? What?
Yeah.
If
It's a very small
I would
percentage.
anywhere on the West Coast, I would have earthquake insurance.
When I lived in Indiana, I had it because I experienced an earthquake in Indiana.
You've got a fault line there.
We do, yes.
Yeah, so oh my gosh, you can't go anywhere. Like, if I moved to Florida, I always joked I would need sinkhole insurance because sinkholes are everywhere and
Yeah,
alligator insurance, and people were like, "You can't get alligator insurance." And I was like, "Someone will pay me, like, out." So,
yeah.
maybe Lloyd's of London.
Yeah, that's a Lloyd's
So
issue.
yeah. Now, let me ask you though, because this was brought up on a podcast. I had a doctor, Dr. Brett Wells, and it was after the Floyd riots, right? So he was in North Carolina and his city had some rioting. And I'll link the episode. It was an amazing episode because he had to hire private security, he had to put windows up. I mean, it was awful. Is that considered an act of, I mean, how is it an act of God? But I don't know. I mean, is that, do you guys have to put in like riots into these policies? Is that a peril?
It just depends on the carrier, but I would say most carriers exclude riots. Riots, war, civil disruption,
Yeah. Okay.
are
Civil
typically
disruption. Yeah.
excluded.
That's what I was
Yeah.
trying to think of the term. Yeah. Crazy. Crazy. And so, and I should probably circle back to him because now I'm really curious. Like, is he now going to make sure that's part of his coverage? I think he was in the process of trying to get reimbursement, but I don't think you know what? I don't think I followed back up with him. But listeners, I'll link that because it was a very fascinating podcast episode. It's totally nobody told me that. Nobody told me you'd have to be ready for a riot at some point. I want to ask you about, because speaking of expensive or the thought is expensive, insurance. when I say cyber insurance, we talk about these ransom, demands, and the Change Healthcare, of course, was a huge thing in our industry. I mean, cybersecurity was maybe kind of vague and out there for a lot of people. You would hear horror stories of that, but when it hit all of us. And finally, like, some of us who have been talking about this are like, okay, finally, like you guys get it. It's real. But it's not just the big Change Healthcare thing. I mean, there's all sorts of ransomware. There's just viruses that pop up and they don't even ask for money. They just wipe. It's just awful. With cybersecurity, though, there is a perception out there that it's expensive insurance and it's hard to get it to pay out. That's the perception. And so, can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure.
Because I feel like you need to have it because, especially with everybody vibe coding nowadays, like you can't guarantee people aren't creating bad actors out there,
Yeah.
bad agents. So, you gotta be careful. So,
Yes.
go ahead, Jeff. Tell me all
To,
about
to,
cybersecurity.
to your point, you feel like it is needed. So back to some of the stats. Increase of about 31% in claims in the cyberspace. Professional services and healthcare account for 35% of those cyber claims with the average cost of $175,000. Medical records go for 50 times more than a social security number. We've seen some attacks. Well, I'm sure we've all seen them, right? Every week I get something from someone saying your information's been leaked. We're going to
Oh,
provide you
yeah.
some free credit monitoring service for a period of time. So is there a
Mhm.
need? Absolutely. Is it expensive? It depends. You can add it on in many cases to your business owner's policy, BOP policy, $350 to $500.
A year or
Those are typically not as robust as if you bought an individual
okay.
policy through an excess and surplus lines market. The excess and surplus lines markets are not regulated by the states. Therefore, they can react faster to the language in their policy because the
Oh,
cyberspace is moving so quickly that that's
yeah.
really where you need probably the best position for your policy. Those policies can run $2,500 to $3,500 depending on what you're looking for. But there's pros and cons. Again, it depends on your budget. Do you want some basic coverage, or do you really want that broader is better perspective and want to pay, in this case, 10 times more for a $3,500 policy? But we definitely have seen breaches, and you got to think not just about what it does to you, ransom, right? That might need to be paid. And something
Yeah.
interesting, I was talking with a cybersecurity guy, and he said, our claim department talks to the thieves like their businesses. They have HR departments. They are really well run organizations overseas. And it's just a business transaction today. It's no longer one guy in a room somewhere in a basement. These are organizations that are run like corporations. So
That's
it's not just
amazing.
ransomware, it's what it can do to you. It can shut you down for a period of
Mhm.
time. The impact to maybe your customers, like providing that third party monitoring service, should there be a breach, all of that is part of what the cyber insurance industry can do for you. And some have gone as far as proactively probing as part of their service, or I should say, as part of the insurance to
Mhm.
detect flaws so that you can proactively fix them. So, more of a risk management approach to the
Okay.
insurance relationship.
I hear managed service providers, that's part of what they do. Also, they do routine attacks. I
Mhm.
guess I used to I think it's white hat attack, something like that, where it's like you're a good agent trying to probe the system,
Oh,
like you were
yes,
saying.
yes.
So the managed service providers offer that. Is that like would I need to have to show that I have such a service provider to meet the criteria? Because aren't you requiring as well that I have a plan in place? Like, you can't just like, you've gotta make sure I'm doing my stuff, like antivirus and checks and stuff, right?
It depends on the insurance carrier. Some
Oh,
are very
wow.
involved in
Okay.
that risk management, some are more hands off. I mean, for
Okay.
the $500 policy, it's probably a little more hands off because just the expense isn't there. Do we require that you purchase, and I'll call it insurance or service through your provider? No. And sometimes that coverage is just as good. So you'll want to
Mhm.
actually get a policy, for lack of better terms, of what they will do for you and compare that to the insurance
Okay.
policy that you may purchase. You don't want to overinsure or have duplicate coverage if you're paying for that already through
Sure.
your insurance provider or through your service provider.
Well, and I was thinking too, like, gosh, if I'm a service provider, I don't wanna be the insurance business either. I don't wanna have cash reserves either. I would wanna work with a company like almost as a certification that, hey, this doctor is doing the right stuff kind of thing. But one thing I do want to ask you is well, and actually, let me back up. The listeners may not be aware that because they might be newer, that when there is a breach and, you have to report it because there's, HIPAA, right? You have to report it. And part of the requirements is that when you were saying the monitoring, that I think it's a period of 1 year, you must offer free monitoring to your patients or anybody that's affected for a period of 1 year. And
Yeah.
you're paying for that, right? So if you didn't have cybersecurity insurance, you're paying for that. And, you all would pick up the bill and whatever you do with that, but I would want you all to pick up the bill, right? And not only that, but you have to notify your patients. So and I believe if it's a big enough breach, you have to take a public notice out, like put something in the paper or something. There's something with that.
Yeah.
And so you don't want to mess around with privacy and HIPAA violations. You just don't want to do that. You don't want to get on a list. That's another thing.
Yeah,
So
and it's more than just paying, right? It's more than just providing the funds to pay for that. Actually getting in early and managing the whole process, right? That's what most of the insurance carriers will do. They'll jump in, they'll set up the credit monitoring, they'll set up the notification. They handle all of
okay.
that for you. That's overwhelming and time consuming and expensive as well.
I can't even imagine having to go through that, and I know several that have had to, and it's been like, they just say it's a nightmare. There is a cautionary tale that goes I remember there was a dental association bulletin that went out, and I know it hit Virginia, but I was also in some states, and for some reason, it was a specialty. It went to a lot of oral surgeons' offices, and you probably have heard similar stories, but
Yes.
basically how it went is the receptionist would get an email from a patient. The email would say, "I tried to complete the forms online. I wasn't able to. Here's my information. Here's the patient forms." And the receptionist, not thinking about it, clicks it and it's a virus. It's so easy. It gets right into the
Yeah.
system from there. And so, if you don't have something on your email for all incoming emails, then just nobody click on anything. Like, this is why we have secure emails for patient information. Don't click anything. And then I believe it was Teresa Pichet from CDA was sharing that even charging your phone into the computer, like a lot of people charge their phone using the USB ports. Like if you've got something on your phone, now it's on the server. And I just thought, oh my gosh, like it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when something
Right.
goes wrong. Do you hear these stories too?
We
Do you
do.
hear even worse? I mean,
Well, a lot of times those attacks don't want to be publicized, right? So we've heard about some big ones in the dental space and medical community, but probably the bigger ones we probably don't hear about. No one wants to
interesting.
have to publicize that they were hacked, and they got to do the right
Yeah.
thing, right? They got to notify their individual customers and provide that service. But yeah,
Hmm.
we have a service, and I'm sure anyone could purchase this. There might even be some carriers that provide it as a risk management, but where they test us. So I occasionally get emails like they're internally trying to see, is Jack going to really click this or, is he
Yeah.
not? They provide reports to myself as leadership and things on, okay, you've got one person that continues to click everything we send. So you can educate your staff on what to be aware
Right.
of. And there's training that comes with that too. And then they do the testing, but it's been very helpful in helping prevent some.
It's very common with corporations, and I think us dental offices, we have to think of it that way. I mean, I've done project work with different companies and had corporate emails, and they would send me these and no one told me it was coming. So, I failed one and then I realized, oh no, like, oh, uh-oh. But I don't think that's a bad idea at all. I mean, you don't realize you've got a lot of new people coming into dentistry that haven't had a professional job yet. Like they're going to click on whatever. And plus my son's generation clicks on everything. Like they're just,
Right.
that's what they do. Yeah, I think we need to protect ourselves out there. All right. So we talked about cybersecurity. We talked about disability. Very important. The malpractice, super important, and my audience is well aware of that. And then we talked about, property insurance too. Am I missing anything? Did we miss? I mean, I'm sure there's policies for a lot of things, but am I missing any of the big ones?
In my opinion, there are two that you're missing. Employers' professional liability insurance, EPLI. There's been an increase, again, back to my stats here, 40% increase in EPLI claims for small businesses under 100 employees. So this is our target market, right?
Wow. Okay.
Sexual harassment, failure to hire and promote, wrongful termination, wage and hour. Protecting against those type things is what that coverage is there for. Again, expensive. If it's an add-on, $500 to your BOP. If you want to buy a separate one, $3,000, $2,500, somewhere in those areas. But definitely something any business owner should consider. Would I have it? Absolutely. One of the more overlooked coverages, and we've recently added this to our portfolio, it does require a special license to sell. We've got all our folks licensed, but we felt it was very important. I had personal experiences with it. That's long-term care. 70% of people over 65 will need some form of long-term care in the future. I experienced it with my mother. She did not have long-term care, so now you're worried about, and she was in Chicago, needed 24-hour care, at $45 an hour, you do the math. And how long does that go for? 6 months, a year. So you start to think about that, and how do you want your family to be able to provide that? Long-term care is something I would make sure everyone explores as well. You don't need to buy all of it at one time. Get the plan, make sure you understand the gaps, look at your budget, and work with your agent over time to make sure you cover the gaps. That's the most important thing.
Well, and I like that you're talking about long-term care. I mean, it's something that's hit our family too. And I mean, I remember when we were in our 20s, my husband and I going, "What's this about?" And it's just so far away. You don't think about it. And we do have a policy, and thank God, because now that I'm, 50, almost 55 this year, oh yeah, like it's getting closer, right? Like you start thinking about it. Going back to I'm sorry, EPL, what did you say? EPLI?
Employers' professional liability. EPLI
Okay.
or EPL or EPLI.
Wait, EPLI. I've heard it called EPLI.
Okay.
That's right.
EPLI.
Right? Okay. No, now I'm remembering. Bent Erickson is an HR company I've worked with over the years, and I've worked with others too, but I remember Tim talking about that. That's why it's in my head. Especially in California, I would absolutely have this because you all are the land of litigation, right? Like,
Right.
holy cow. And very often on the plaintiffs, like the plaintiff has the upper hand a lot of times from what I understand for that. Like you really have to defend yourself. And there's so many cases of it's not even if you get a case of sexual harassment against you, you have to defend yourself even if you're in the clear. Like you have to defend yourself, right? You can't just
Correct.
take it. And it's pretty common nowadays, right? Like you were saying, there's a big increase in those cases. Talk to me about the HR side, because I feel like if there was a real focus in HR from the leadership of the practice, this would maybe not be a huge issue, but maybe that's an oversimplification. I don't know.
No, again, that gets back to the risk management side of the insurance industry, whether it's employer practices, right? And best practices, do's and don'ts, documentation, particularly if you're firing someone that might be in a protected class. How do you go about doing that properly to prevent? I don't know if you'll prevent the lawsuit, but you'll definitely prepare for the lawsuit, right? But that risk management is another side of our industry that almost every carrier has experts that you can tap into, whether it's for EPLI, cyber, property.
I want to just caution people out there, from the HR companies, and you could say, maybe they have a vested interest in selling their product. But when I take a look at their product versus the fill it out on your own, kits that are sold out there, create your own HR manual, there's just such a huge difference in the product. And if you're going to DIY your manual, I'm pretty confident in saying that you're not going to do the work that's needed to document everything, because it won't be easy for you and you won't think about it. When you work with an HR company, you really start to understand, whoa, this is not stuff you want to mess around with. And the protected classes are different. They've changed over time. You've got a lot of my age. I probably could bring a protected class suit if somebody were looking to fire me. And the office is full of 20-year-olds. I would probably have a decent case. And if I don't, you still have to defend yourself. I feel like doing the DIY manual, it's just shocking to me how often people just think that's okay. And from 10 years ago, even, like, oh my goodness.
And there are a lot of those out there nowadays, right? Particularly AI assisted, and it's all virtual. And probably like you, I prefer to talk to someone because they may bring something up that isn't in a form that now, oh, that's another problem we need to discuss. Let's put that into the manual. We didn't know you operated in that fashion. Again, getting as much out to your consultants, whether it's your practice support, insurance agent, accountant, very important. Teresa, I did
I
not
have
touch on work comp. Do we have
Oh,
time to do that real quick?
let's talk about it. Yeah, let's talk about it. We've got a
Okay.
couple minutes. Let's talk about it.
That's a coverage, right? If you have employees
Mhm.
in almost every state we work in, I know you have to provide workers' compensation. It's probably a national
Yes, we do. Yeah.
requirement.
Yeah.
Most insurance agents and carriers allow the business owner to make the determination of whether someone's classified as an independent contractor or not.
Okay.
So before I got into the dental insurance space, and again, I'll mention we're owned by the California Dental Association, so we have very deep ties to our members and our customers. I would have just asked, do you have an independent contractor? I would have put them
Yeah.
down as an independent contractor. We would have excluded them from payroll, and we would have brought the price down and provided them workers' comp. It's very important that you have an independent contractor conversation with your agent.
Mhm.
Particularly in California, it's almost impossible to be an independent contractor as a dentist. If you
Yeah.
are told where to be, you share office staff, you
Mhm.
equipment, you are an employee,
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
probably should be classified as an employee. And a lot of the carriers they don't care. They let you make that decision. In our agency, we over consult in that area to protect you from hurting yourself, basically, provide
Yeah.
another
Yeah.
level of oversight. But that's very important. Understand the tests that are out there in your Department of Labor or in California's Department of Industry Relations.
Mhm.
Understand what those rules are for each specific industry because it's different for dentists than other industries in California and probably the same in other states. So very important.
Yeah, workman's comp. I didn't even think about that. I just assumed kind of that that was in under disability, but that's not correct. And you've got a ton of employees too. You've got to make sure you've got enough coverage to cover, if any, you have to assume, there'll be maybe one or two, but you really have to price it like, what if you have multiple people out? You just got to be safe, right? And I did have a question though that brought up something else. Say I bring on an associate and, they're going to work at the practice now full time. They also should have their own policy, or are they covered under the owner policy? How does that, and I should call you to update you,
Yep.
right? How does that work?
They should have their own professional liability policy. The professional
Okay.
liability or malpractice, as some people call it, follows the individual. Okay.
Okay.
And as a practice owner, I would require that, as you mentioned, the DSOs, right? They've got people managing that. They're making sure that that coverage is there for all their associates. The workers' comp, as I mentioned, could that person be an independent contractor or do you need to include them on your workers' compensation policy? There are strict rules. And if you go down I think there's 12 different criteria and they are truly an
Yeah.
independent, they wouldn't need to be added to your workers' comp. That would be very
Okay.
rare in the state of California. More than likely, they're an employee. You would need to include their salary into your workers' compensation assessment, which drives your premium, but that would
Okay.
make sure that they are covered. And it's not disability. We'll cover someone when they're hurt or out of work. It really protects the employer from being sued by the employee. In fact,
Okay.
when workers' compensation came out, not to bore everyone with insurance, they called it the Great Compromise. And it was a way to protect employers. Not a lot of employers look at it that way because they have to pay for it, but it protects in many cases from that lawsuit.
Oh, yeah, because if you're on the hook for somebody who then ends up with a back injury for life, like, you're on the hook for that. Oh my goodness, yeah, no, I'm with you, I wanna be overinsured in this area.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
it's a requirement and you will be fined if you don't have it.
and then as far as the property or the business policy, if I'm bringing on an associate, I'm probably buying more equipment, maybe outfitting another room, so that's what you mean when you say, "Call us when there's a change." That's a good
Exactly.
example, I guess, of that. Okay.
Exactly.
All
Yep.
right. Yeah, because now I'm getting it. Like, now I'm thinking back to all the times we did not call you. We did not call our carrier, and, we're gonna have a talk, my old boss and I,
Yeah.
about that. Because now I'm thinking, "Uh-oh, what's he doing now?" So, yeah, I gotta circle back.
And if it's your first employee, right, that's where that EPLI conversation will come in. Oh, have you thought about
Mhm.
EPLI? Uh,
Yeah.
so yeah,
Okay.
even the small changes impact.
Let me ask you too, I was afraid I was gonna forget this, but it just popped up. Key person insurance. It's not common in dental, but I feel like it should be common in dental. But what is your opinion of it? I mean, do you see it being utilized? Is it nice to have? Is it a must have? What do you think?
Yeah, so very much like business overhead expense. Key person is there's not an insurance There might be a policy that's called that, but it's more of a concept, right? It's a legal
Okay.
concept. Probably there will be a contract between you and someone that was critical to your business if you lost them. So if you had partnerships, typically two people dependent upon each other running a practice. If something happens to my partner, I need to replace him right away. So I might need life insurance or disability, which would be the key person insurance on him. And he would need it
Okay.
on me to keep the continuity in the office. And it could be 4 or 5 people, but that's
Okay.
the concept of key person insurance. It's usually funded by some insurance product, life insurance or disability.
Okay. Okay. Because I remember maybe it was a bond or something that was taken out, but I remember it coming up in conversations that, if you've got somebody who, if they left tomorrow, you wouldn't know where any password is or like you're dead in the water pretty much. You would need something like that. But that makes sense that it would be kind of wrapped up in all of that.
Yeah. Now, I'm not familiar with coverage if someone was to leave. So now you've got me interested and I will go research. Is there coverage out there for that?
It wasn't when you leave, it was like if something like if they were incapacitated.
Yes, that's where the
So it's not when
disability
they
in
leave,
life
but if
comes
they
in. Yeah.
okay, that makes sense. Okay, so maybe it's just maybe that was a part of it and I was misunderstanding it because I definitely heard it referred to as key person insurance, and
Yeah.
I always thought it was a separate policy on key person insurance. That's
It,
interesting. Okay.
it's the concepts funded by life insurance or disability insurance.
Okay, got it, got it. If you're a dental biller, you already know how frustrating it is to find clear answers. You search on Google or Facebook, but instead of solutions, you get vague or incorrect information. And finding people who truly understand dental billing and can actually help, it's even harder. That's exactly why I created Dental Revenue Network. Dental Revenue Network is one of the fastest growing communities for dental billers, a place where you can connect with the best and brightest professionals in the field. Post your problem. Fellow billers and experts will help you out. The benefit is that you can ask specific questions and receive specific answers that can actually help resolve your problem. We also provide updated resources to make dental billing easier. On top of that, DRN hosts monthly meetings and events where members can connect, learn, and grow their professional network. Did you miss a meeting? No problem. Every meeting is recorded and available on the DRN recordings page, so you can catch up anytime. Business owner members have an additional meeting every month to focus on growth, marketing, and compliance matters. Everything you need to confidently manage dental insurance and RCM is all in one place. Go to dentalrevenuenetwork.com and be a part of our growing community today. Okay, wow, this was a lot. And my audience is nerdy. They're going to love this. I mean, this is like we deal with insurance all the time, and this is the sort of the other side of insurance that we just, we don't get exposed to it very often. And if you're an experienced manager, this is part of your purview. You're not just running the reception area. Like this is true business management, and it's super,
Yeah.
super important. Thank you so much for coming on. How did they reach you, Jack? And I know we're going to put some links in the show notes, but how do they reach you? Should they have any questions or investigate, the services and policies?
Sure. I'll give you my direct line, 916-554-5356. They can always call the Dentist Insurance Company, which is the carrier, or they can call the Dentist Insurance Company Insurance Solutions, which is the agency. And we're online, so you can look us up. But my individual
Okay.
number, 916-554-5356.
And it's not just California. You said you're in a couple other states as
We're in
well.
15 different
Um,
states. Correct.
okay. Okay. And then I think the big takeaway here, if you're happy with who's covering you, then reach out, establish a cadence with them and return their calls. I mean, I'm now kind of kicking myself for not being as proactive about it, but it's been years. So managers, you can do something about that.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
we work, and there are a lot of agencies that work with the associations, right? The state associations. So we're endorsed by several. We
Yeah.
work closely with others. Our model is that anyone can call us and we'll consult them at no charge. You choose to do business with us, great. If you don't, but we want you to get to the right space with the proper coverage.
Yeah, and that's been my experience with you. I mean, I've talked to doctors who have called and got good advice and then realized, it was not a fit for whatever
Right.
reason, but you've got a pretty decent reputation out there.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for being a resource and hope you come back on. We can talk about this stuff because, oh my gosh, we probably could do a whole show on stories. Like things that can go wrong, right? So, but I definitely would be interested in talking to a TDIC expert on like malpractice cases and things like that. So I'm going to follow back up with you on that. So,
Yes, claims
okay.
are always interesting. We've got a lot of
Ugh,
unique ones.
yeah, for sure. I mean, and actually, that's how you know you're an insurance nerd when you sit around and just want to talk about these things. So, all right. Well, thank you again, Jack. And dear listeners, I always want to thank you for spending your time with me.
Thank you, Teresa.